This Leading Differently mini-series is kindly sponsored by Pact Solutions. University leaders know that complexity slows progress. Pact helps universities deliver digital transformation that endures and improves the day-to-day experience for students and staff. The team focuses on the student journey and the core systems that matter to simplify processes, standardise integrations, and unlock trusted data for reporting and decision-making. Their approach is adopt, not adapt, change with people, not to them, and governance that moves at the right pace without unnecessary bureaucracy. From strategy to hands-on delivery, they reduce risk, accelerate outcomes, and build lasting capability inside the institution. Pact has supported many universities, including Birmingham City University, Buckinghamshire New University, University of London, Southampton Solent University, and the Royal College of Art. Learn more at pact-solutions.co.uk and connect with the team to explore how Pact can help your next transformation be a success. I'm Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Professor David Mba, Vice-Chancellor of Birmingham City University. David became VC in October 2023, and in this episode he talks about developing the vision for the university as being an exemplar anchor institution and how its work is intertwined with the City of Birmingham. He shares more about the innovative way in which science, technology, engineering, mathematics and the arts come together at the university, including what goes on in the unique Steamhouse. And we also talk about what cultural change means to reduce the degree attainment gap and to ensure high levels of student satisfaction. David, welcome to the podcast and thanks for being my guest in this mini-series. You started your academic career in engineering. What were the career steps that then took you into higher education leadership, and what was your motivation to become a Vice-Chancellor?
Thank you for having me, first of all, and it's great to be here. I never planned to be an academic, let alone a Vice-Chancellor. I did my undergraduate in aerospace engineering. I got a first-class honours and I was quite keen to get work in the aerospace industry. And I tried for many, many months. And I ended up washing cars for quite a long time whilst I was looking for work. And I just couldn't get into the engineering sector. And I came across an advert for a PhD position at Cranfield University. And I thought, well, better than washing cars at that time. So I applied and I got the job. And since then, I never left academia. I did very well. My PhD was very good. I got a gold medal for my PhD. So academic colleagues at the university just offered me work straight after. And so it began. And I was very happy being very technical. I was a professor in machinery, vibration of machinery. I was quite happy, leading a big turbo machinery group at Cranfield, testing gas turbine engines. So it was really, full on technical and experimental for that matter. But then I decided, having seen a new head of school outline their vision for the engineering department, I thought actually I could do better than that. I thought I could outline a vision that was more engaging and inspiring. And I thought, well, actually, let's try leading a department. So I then got a dean position at South Bank and went into leadership and carried on ever since. But I never set out to be an academic, let alone a Vice-Chancellor.
And how would you describe the role of Vice-Chancellor in the 2025 environment? And what do you feel is needed from it to enable an institution to thrive?
So we have a conservatoire, the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire within the university, the only one that has that in the sector. And, I do go and watch events. It's like I sometimes watch the orchestra playing, and there's a conductor who kind of, pulls in different musicians at different times, different volumes. I think the role of a vice-chancellor is very much like a conductor, having to play different tunes whilst ultimately keeping harmony and keeping the sense of direction. So that's kind of how I perceive the role of a vice-chancellor. And what's needed from it to enable an institution to thrive. I think sticking to the mission and values or strategy of the university, you have to stick to your guns and stick to that, because that's what defines your institution. And having the resilience to deliver on that.
Birmingham City University has just over 30,000 students, and its vision is to be an exemplar anchor institution. What's fueled the focus of this vision? And you just mentioned the strategy there. Can you say a bit more about the university and your strategy 2030?
So I joined the university 2 years ago, and as any new vice-chancellor in a new university, you begin to engage with your colleagues to understand the university. And one thing that kept coming up was the strapline, "We are the University for Birmingham." And I remember asking my colleagues, well, define that, what's the narrative behind that? And that wasn't forthcoming as I thought it might be. So I was quite clear that we needed to begin to think about a new vision. I wanted that vision to be built bottom up, emphasis bottom up. I absolutely wanted no influence from the executive team or the middle management within the university. It had to be built bottom up. And so it was. It took us about 6 months to get to a final strategy. But that strapline, to be an exemplar anchor institution, reflects that narrative of being the University for Birmingham. It reflects the importance we've played in the city for over 180 plus years. We have evolved as the city has evolved. We have aspired as the city has aspired. And we have provided the majority of the skills within the region. I don't think anybody in Birmingham who goes to a hospital for anything and is treated by a nurse, probably a nurse who was once a BCU student. So that's how kind of intertwined we are with the city. I really want the city to be BCU's campus, and it is that campus that's going to fuel the city going forward.
And the academic composition of BCU is broad, but it's also notable that it has a significant number of creative programmes. And you've already mentioned, it's the only institution in England to house a music and drama conservatoires, institutions that are normally standalone. Now, that focus on creative disciplines is against a sector backdrop of many universities dropping their arts courses. What are your reflections on that sector picture, and why is it important for BCU to be different?
So we were founded on creative endeavour in 1843 as the Birmingham Government School of Design, when manufacturers in Birmingham were struggling to stem the tide of French manufactured imports. That is 1843, and the manufacturers at that time decided to bring together artists, designers, and manufacturers to help address the manufacturing challenges they had to stem that tide, which they did do. So for us, we having been founded on creative endeavour, having the largest, or probably the only, the largest faculty in the West Midlands of creative graduates, over 4,000 plus creative students in that faculty. It's unique to us. It's kind of part of our DNA. And yes, it's sad to hear and to see many arts courses being closed. And I use the word the arts in the broader sense, being closed across the sector. I think the arts has been significantly undervalued by the government, given the economic impact it makes. But the power of the arts to change, to bring cohesion, to help with understanding, you cannot quantify what that means. And I'll give myself as an example, as an engineer who was quite, a boring engineer, if I put it that way. I took a leap and joined the University of the Arts London as a Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation. And it was the best thing I ever did, because I began to understand the power of the arts. and to begin to appreciate what it can do for communities and so forth, and how it helps bring cohesion in difficult times, and how it helps to unpick questions around difficult topics that are sometimes, difficult to openly discuss. So I fully appreciate the power of the arts. I'm really a strong advocate of the arts. We just have to find ways to make it work, and that might mean some cross subsidies. But for our organization, for my university, the arts is always going to be a fundamental part of it.
And looking at your, curriculum more broadly within the university, you have a multidisciplinary approach designed into your curriculum of STEAM. So you've got science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And you also have something called a Steamhouse. Can you say a bit more about how all of those disciplines, that multidisciplinary approach, happens within the institution?
Great. So the Steamhouse was a 70 million pound investment, opened about 3-4 years ago, and it's meant to, in effect, symbolize the uniqueness of bringing the STEM subjects, as you've outlined, and the arts. And it serves two purposes. One, it's a space where we have businesses, students, and startups all within one roof, one umbrella, and it creates the space for the interaction between these three separate entities, essentially creating the fusion that aligns. Now, all the businesses that we kind of incubate, all the startups, all have a STEAM element to it, so they all have a creative element to it. And the Steamhouse itself has fantastic prototyping equipment, be it 5G, AR, VR, high-tech stuff. It also has a advanced prototyping manufacturing laboratory. Essentially, it invites creatives and manufacturers to come into this creative space and prototype, and to think multidisciplinary in that respect. So that's kind of one aspect of the STEAM agenda. The other aspect is one that we're still developing, and that's how it relates to the academic provision. So I appointed a Vice-Chancellor of STEAM last year. It was the first time anyone in sector has kind of held that post of PVC STEAM. And what we're doing is embedding multidisciplinary live projects within Steamhouse. So essentially, as an example, we might have a community project that requires students from law, from nursing, from computing, from engineering, all to work on solving a problem. And essentially, it gives our students an understanding of the thinking and maybe culture of the different subject areas, and how to best communicate with different subject areas. And ultimately, it helps with their understanding of communicating, engaging with others who are not in your subject area, but ultimately to deliver a project in a defined period of time, working as a team. So something along those lines. And then similarly, the Steamhouse, the companies I've mentioned, we have businesses in there. Last week, it so happens that Cisco, kind of a global leading technology firm, opened an office in Steamhouse. And that means that some of my students and staff will have access to work with Cisco, but Cisco are also in a very creative space where they can engage with startups and engage with students. Another company that's joined is Arab. Anyway, sorry, I can go on and go on. Sorry, I'll stop there. But I think hopefully you get the sense of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a lot of the STEAM focus is actually about student employability as well, and equipping students for those skills that they're going to need within the workplace into the future.
Absolutely. And now we're within our STEAM agenda is a bit more of AI, and not necessarily writing AI code, because that's not the type of institution we are. We are very much about applying knowledge. So it's very much about how do we equip our students to use AI agents to help solve problems. And in a way, it speaks to a kind of a philosophy on knowledge exchange and research. reflecting very much on the strapline of being an exemplar anchor institution, I want our research and knowledge exchange to address problems in the city first and foremost. Yes, we want to engage nationally and internationally, absolutely, but how is our intellectual know-how actually helping to solve problems in the city first and foremost?
You've talked really warmly about the university and that connection, or being rooted in Birmingham. And I know that you draw really heavily from the region for student recruitment. You've recently seen some really positive outcomes in student satisfaction at undergraduate and taught postgraduate levels. And I also know that you're focusing on addressing the significant degree awarding gap. Addressing that gap, it can't be achieved, can it, by just small initiatives? It's about real cultural change. And it's really easy to use that cultural change phrase. But what does it actually mean and look like for you at BCU?
Excellent question. So if I just give some context about the awarding gap or attainment gap, and I come on to the context around the culture change. So I'm one of two Black vice-chancellors in England. And I remember 3 years ago, before my youngest daughter went to university, I was doing some work on awarding gaps. And I remember a discussion we had around what university she wanted to go to. And we spoke about the metrics, representation, what proportion of students are from minority ethnic backgrounds and so forth. And I had to explain what the awarding gap was. And that's a very difficult thing to say to any young person, that no matter how hard you try, statistically, you will not achieve your best relative to others. So, so the question about the attainment gap, is one that I am addressing at pace. We have to move quickly because we can't afford to disadvantage anybody because of our systems and our processes. So that's the kind of context. In terms of the culture change, particularly at this university, is very much around accountability and how we take seriously our professional responsibilities as academic tutors, and how we remind ourselves that we're here to serve our students first and foremost. So the change that we're trying to drive is very much about revisiting those three simple basic concepts. And it's about how we behave as an organization and how we reflect that in the way we engage with our students and the outcomes of our students. So it's going to take a while. It's meant some restructuring. It's meant being very clear on what our focus is as an organization, as an institution. And things like the awarding gap is very much high on the agenda. So there are many strands to how we go about fixing it. But for me, the very first thing is taking ownership of it, taking responsibility as a module leader or course leader. Look at your module, look at your course. What are the metrics saying to you? What are your B3 metrics saying to you? What you're doing for continuous improvement? What you're doing to improve on all those metrics? That for me is the very first start. Let's take accountability, which in my view, I think has been missing at my university. I'm sorry to say that, but that is fact. So we're now trying to change that, and then build on all those numerous initiatives across the sector on how to go about addressing some of those gaps.
And I guess in looking at those awarding gaps and colleagues making those changes, support is required, isn't it, for people to do that when they're looking at their curriculum? How's that going in your institution?
It's going great. So we have our access and participation plan, which is really going on, but we also have a project titled Project Zero, which is about reducing the gap. And that involves identifying areas where we have some of these biggest gaps, working with some of our teaching and learning development team to work with lecturers and course teams to address some of the issues around curriculum, assessment type, flexibility on assessments, and trying to, in all of this, make sure the student voice is absolutely clear and heard. So it's kind of, there are 3 or 4 different ways but we're simultaneously trying to unpick the issues to address.
And you mentioned students there, and obviously the cultural change you're trying to achieve is for students. How are they brought into discussions about change, whether that's about the awarding gap, whether it's about student satisfaction? How does that relationship work within the institution?
So we have a fantastic relationship with the Students' Union Executive. I have one-to-ones every month with the president of the SU. We have very positive meetings. We are absolutely, in terms of the values of my executive and the SU executive, completely aligned. So we have a very, very good relationship. I must say it's a very good relationship. Now, going back to the question about a student voice and how is that reflected in the change we are driving, when we developed the strategy, the student voice was part of that development from the very start, as was our alumni and external stakeholders. So the student voice has always been central to not just defining our strategy, but defining what we want to see as an outcome going forward. So they've been very much part of all of this. And, if you were to ask any of my students what has changed within the last year, I hope they will begin to be able to say things around improved teaching quality, improved structural support, improvements in space. The things that really matter to students is absolutely what drives us. We subsidize our canteens. I am 2 years ago, an international student, or any student actually, wasn't necessarily able to buy a hot meal because the price of food was just too much. Now, any of my students for £2.95 can get a hot meal. So, these are all things that mean that as an institution, students are at the center of all our decision making.
And as you say, the relationship between your executive and the Students' Union executive is absolutely critical to getting some of those things right, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Sticking on the topic of change, you recently undertaken an academic reorganisation of the university. Can you say a bit more about that and how it's part of the cultural change that you want to achieve?
The culture change that is needed to deliver the strategy is very much driven not just by the academic colleagues, but also by professional services. So in the context of if I go back to a point I made earlier on, accountability, professional responsibility, and so forth, I think what struck me in as I was beginning to understand my organization was that I didn't feel everybody was bought into the mission and the values of the university. And so I made an offer to my colleagues, a mutually agreed resignation scheme, where I said to colleagues that, look, we've just published a new strategy. Delivery of this new strategy means a change in culture. It means we're going to be driven more by accountability, by data, by performance. And if they didn't feel that, the values that the university is now going to be holding and moving towards, realizing, that there was a chance for them to perhaps take a mutually agreed resignation and to move on. So that was one part. And then the other part is in terms of delivery for our students meant that we had to look at the academic structures. I felt that there was too many layers between the executive and my lecturers at the coalface. And also there were just far too many middle managers. And ultimately, a message that comes from my office, as an example, or the executive gets misinterpreted by the time it gets down to. So it was also about reducing the number of layers, but having a clear focus on where we need leadership, in what elements we need leadership. And this is all part of the change in culture, but the change that is required to ultimately deliver the strategy for 2030 and beyond. So that's part of the reasons behind the reorganization of the academic portfolio.
And what sort of structure have you moved from to within that?
So we had faculties before, and we've got rid of the entire faculty level, and now we just have schools. So all the Vice-Chancellors, associate deans of faculties, we've just moved all that layer away and created 7 schools and the conservatoire.
And what opportunities do you have to engage with colleagues who are teaching or supporting students on a day-to-day basis?
they can't get rid of me. I try to be everywhere. So I walk around. My office is right next to where the students coalesce. So, I'm always listening. I'm always talking to students. But I also meet my colleagues on a regular basis. I say hello all the time. I try to make myself very, very visible. I encourage all my colleagues, both academic and professional services, stop me, say hello, tell me what's on their mind, what's not working, what's great, what's not great. And that's the kind of culture I want to kind of instill within our community. Let's be open. We may not agree, but let's talk about it. And sometimes just saying things and getting things off your chest helps a lot.
Collaboration, mergers and partnerships is a significant topic within the sector at the moment, and that focus will likely increase. What are your broad reflections on those activities? And is there anything in particular that you would say the sector needs to either hold on to or let go of when looking at this?
This is a very tricky subject area, not because I think we're used to competing against each other, and collaboration doesn't come naturally for us. I think collaboration in research, I think that's slightly different, but collaboration in terms of the taught component of what we do as universities is a very difficult area to explore how we can work more collaboratively and closer together. There's been a lot of talk from Universities UK about transformation and sharing services. Again, they're all good ideas, but in practice, there's not many examples we can latch onto and look to learn from. If I take an example, Birmingham City, we have 5 universities, 4 of which, I think maybe actually all 5, are offering nursing. We all have simulation equipment. So there's a duplication. Now, I think a conversation that I would like the sector to have is one about regional collaboration and how we find our speciality or our niche within a crowded market. And this, in a way, begins to reflect on the post-16 white paper that talks about specialization and addressing regional issues and regional skills needs. We don't all 5 universities have to teach nursing or engineering. So I think those are the real discussions that, in my view, need to happen. And we haven't, to my knowledge, opened up those kind of conversations. And then you bring in the FE colleges. And here's a tension, some universities like mine offer foundation programs at level 3, as the colleges. And so we find ourselves in a way competing. I think it was a big mistake to allow HE to do foundation year, level 3, but that's history now. Wouldn't it be great if all universities in Birmingham City, if we all agreed that all the level 3 foundation programs to be delivered by FE colleges, and we do level 4, 5, 6. It's about sharing. We're all about educating and providing skills, social mobility. So I think there are ways we could work together, but we haven't really begun to have those kind of very honest conversations.
Looking within your own region that you've just talked about there, I mean, you are working collectively with Coventry University and the University of Wolverhampton as the West Midlands Combined Universities Partnership. Can you say a bit more about the nature and focus of that partnership, and what do you hope the outcomes will be?
So this partnership has been going on, must be for a decade, if not longer. And it's a fantastic partnership where, particularly around research and the skills agenda, we pitch together for research grants, regional or national. We work collaboratively in sharing experiences. We don't share services, to be clear. We don't share services or share curriculum on the taught component. But we do have something called a credit compass, where we have kind of an agreement where students can transfer between institutions, and we recognize the credits from different universities. So we fund a couple of people to drive the combined universities, because collectively we have over 100,000 students, I think, more or less. So we are significantly impactful economically and from a skills agenda in the West Midlands. And we're all of a similar ilk. We're all post-92s. And we're all about practice and applied knowledge. So for the future, it's created a great platform to think about collaboration in the sense that, as I made reference to just a few minutes ago, how can the three of us pool resources in such a way that's mutually beneficial to all? So I have great hopes for this, but we'll see.
Talking with you today, it's really clear that you have an ambitious and exciting medium to long-term plans for the university. But finishing up our conversation, what are you looking forward to the most in the next 12 months?
What I want most for the next 12 months is to see improved outcomes for my students. That's it. That's all I need. Because in the end, I'm here to serve my students, as all of us in the university. And if we can improve the proportion of students that get good honors, we reduce the attainment gap, we have great student experience, that would be fantastic. So I think what I'd like to see in the next 12 months is just improvements for the experience and outcomes of my students.
David, it's been great talking with you today. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you.
Job Shadowing HE is proudly supported by the Association of Higher Education Professionals as a valuable source of professional insight. It was presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.